Hi. Now I got audio.
Sorry, I had some noise in the background. Let me just get these hooked up.
You mean noise on my side or yours?
Oh, mine.
Okay. Just checking.
I like your background with Bowie.
Oh, yeah, this is my favorite. It's our wall of fame. So it's a project that we've worked on or where we've been involved.
Oh, cool. So we'll just give everyone a couple minutes to join. We already have some already with us.
And so when people ask, can they ask questions? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how will I see?
Oh, I'll go over the format with you. In your Zoom box, there should be a Q&A button in the toolbar.
Yeah,
and that's where people will put their questions.
Okay.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome to those who've hopped on so far. Just give a couple minute or two more, and then we'll get started. How are things going in Belgium these days?
Well, we're actually fine. Our figures are quite stable in terms of COVID, so we'll see what the future brings.
That's good to hear for now.
Yeah, for now it's fine.
Yeah.
It's difficult to get to our office in London, so I'm hoping that the quarantine measures will go down, but for the time being, I haven't been there since February. So.
Wow, yeah. Okay, so I'll just get us warmed up here. Welcome everyone for today's ArtEvolve. Our topic is how innovation is driving sustainability and conservation. Our guest today is Leen Gysen, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Might need to correct me on that. Managing partner at IPARC, the international platform for art, research, and conservation, with locations in Belgium as well as the UK. So just a reminder to everyone who's on with us today, feel free to pop into our conversation via the chat. Just make sure that you send your message to all panelists and attendees, otherwise only Leen and I will see it, and that's not nearly as fun. And then we also have a Q&A section, so we'll take questions at the end. If you come up with any questions as we go through, just so that they don't get lost in the chat, go ahead and click on the Q&A button and add your question there. The other great thing is you can also upvote questions that you'd like to see the answers to, so those will be the first ones up once we get to the Q&A section. So, and I am Mackenzie, Chief Commercial Officer at Articheck, and a lot of you already know who I am, but I'll introduce myself anyway. So, Leen, will you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background?
Yes, sure. So I'm a managing partner at IPARC, but also of spin-off ICM, or in full integrated contamination management. We do love abbreviations. I was trained as an art historian and an archaeologist, and after graduation I became a scientific assistant at the university in Leuven in Belgium, and used to work there in Turkey on large excavation sites. And then that career was followed by an MBA and a corporate career in marketing. So it's a bit of a strange combination, but it proves to be a good one. And I joined the Center for Fine Arts in Brussels and rebranded to the cultural brand Beaux-Arts. And then I turned 39 and I decided I wanted to run my own company. And I started IPARC, which is almost 10 years ago, with my husband. And he's an old master painting conservator and conservation scientist.
Nice. Well, I like how, I also have, marketing and art history in my background. So I very much identify with that journey. It's a strange one, but it ends up working out in the end. Yeah. So for those attendees who don't know, will you tell us more about IPARC?
Well, IPARC provides multidisciplinary conservation and research. We also have art storage here in Brussels and preventive conservation, including pest management. We're a team of about 20 masters in conservation with different specializations ranging from paintings over wood, stone, metal, paper, visual media, textile, polychromic objects, and contemporary materials. And we have sites, like you said, in Brussels and in London. And we were the first SME from the cultural sector to win the National SME of the Year award in 2018, which was really nice.
Oh, congratulations. That's great. So, you know, when we first started talking about doing this particular topic, you know, when we had a conversation about all the different programs that you have going at IPARC and all the different approaches that you take, and I just found it really interesting how, you know, in everything that you do, from how the organization works to how you do conservation, you really have a focus on sustainability, but particularly, you know, sustainability using new methods and innovative methods. So I think we're kind of going to divide this up into a couple pieces. So first, I'd love to talk about treatment and conservation. So treatment methods have always been a big question in sustainability. You know, a lot of treatment methods have been around for a long time and they're not necessarily so nice for the planet, right? So how do you balance the effectiveness and sustainability in your treatment and conservation?
Yeah. Well, in terms of insect treatments, I think when it comes to effectiveness, our ICM method is really unbeatable, as the temperature and both the relative humidity are monitored and they're regulated in a confined area. So once the necessary temperature has been reached, we know that 100% of the insect population, and that would be the insects, the larvae and the eggs, will be dead, period.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about your ICM.
Yes, we're talking about ICM, and so the pest treatments. And so the energetic input is very low with anything, let's say, between 50 and 100 kilowatt hours for a regular sized climatic chamber, and only warm air and regulated humidity are used. So there's no additives, no toxicity. So the sustainability is excellent, actually.
So that's a big departure from sort of typical insect treatment, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And add to this, I mean, if you had to do that the ICM treatments can solve two problems simultaneously, which is first the one of insect control, plus the decontamination of the residues of biocides in objects. So it really, I mean, it ticks two boxes in terms of sustainability.
Sure.
And then in terms of conservation treatments, which is on the restoration side, I think the ICOM and the ECHO, which is a European conservators organization, methodology they help us finding the balance. I think a number of principles that are always applied in a professional conservation project, and the first one is reversibility. So anything we do needs to be taken off without any damage to the original layers. And so this principle really drives the use of non-aggressive, less toxic products. And we always work by these guidelines. And the second principle is the minimal intervention, and that clearly sets the boundaries of a treatment. And then there is something else that we've seen the past, let's say, decades, where we've seen an evolution in the educational system, where our profession has become more professional. It's become an academic master's degree in many countries, maybe not in all, but in lots of countries at least. And it makes for conservators to be better prepared to deal with safety, with health and chemical interference. They're much better trained in that way. So sustainability can be a topic that you can discuss because they have the background for this.
So that's interesting that, you know, sort of one of the innovations is education that you're talking about. Absolutely. So, and particularly the safety education, also the scientific education, would you say?
Yes, yes. Because, I mean, conservation is all about chemistry. I mean, it's not an artistic job. I mean, they're not artists, they're scientists. And so people always see the conservator with, behind the painting retouching, but that's only part of the job, or on a sculpture, what have you. But a big part of it is testing, is finding the right chemical solution to do something. So chemistry is a big part. And if you know your products, you know what toxicity can mean, you know how to avoid them as well. And I'll come back to that later in the methods
Sure.
that we, yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of, what innovations in treatment have you seen that you find to be particularly sustainable?
Well, in insect treatments, at least, I think anything that has gotten us away from using poison, which was the case up till very recently, and still is in some areas, because it harms not only the target insects, but also us, and not only the conservators, it also harms curators working with collections, art handlers, art shippers, and a lot. So freezing mold is, for example, another sustainable application. Because, yeah, it doesn't require any toxicity to be added either. And for some objects, freezing is definitely an option.
Is that sort of like the liquid nitrogen that we think of for medical things?
Nitrogen is something else. That's the anoxia treatment. And of course, in some cases, this can be very useful. Depends on the circumstances and the form. I mean, you have anoxia chambers, but you also have bubbles, which are difficult to control. The thing with anoxia is you use nitrogen, and there is at least in the EU, there is a biocide regulation that forbids the use of nitrogen, with the exception of a few museums that have their own chamber. So there is limitation there. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And also, we don't know what the impact is of nitrogen on surface layers. There's been very research on this, so we're kind of hesitant to use it anyway.
Sure. That makes sense. I mean, I think there's a balance between also using things that are innovative and things that are maybe too new to really know what they will do in the long term.
For quite some time,
Yeah. So many materials that, like you were saying, poisons and things like that, not only affect and treatment chemicals and things that have been used in past years, past decades, past centuries, now have an effect on, the health and well-being of people who are interacting with the art. So how do you, now that you're sort of, working with pieces that sometimes you need to remove those past conservation methods that were maybe toxic to humans, what do you do with that waste? How do you deal with waste?
Yeah. Well, the trouble with some of these biocides in art collections is that you need to make them accessible, removable in the first place, because they may be deep in the object. So some of the substances we need to kind of lock away in the objects, and this is where ICM comes in. So ICM can unlock particles, molecules, mobilize some of the biocides even in the objects, remove them and collect them in filters. And these filters then have to be disposed, of course, as toxic waste according to legal requirements, and these may differ from country to country, of course. And the same applies basically for waste that comes from conservation treatments. It's just something that I think you need the right processes for this, and of course the right suppliers where you can send your waste to. But it's a matter of finding out what the legal requirements are and how you should integrate this in the work process and the workflow. It's something that's really doable, not very complicated, but you need to be very attentive to it.
Sure. And when you think about choosing a supplier, do you find that some waste management companies are more sustainable than others, or in terms of how they deal with the waste itself?
Well, it's difficult to say. Let's say that the waste sector is, there's a contradictory in there. I mean, some of them are very aware of sustainability and are really working because they're also recycling, but there's always this gray area where you don't know what they're doing. So it is kind of difficult to assess exactly who is the best supplier for the question that you may have. There is no real certification either yet, so that may come in the future. So yeah, what we do is we kind of go and visit them and assess them on site, so we see what they do. But in Belgium, at least, the government is not really certifying them in that way yet, but I'm suspecting that will come in the future.
Yeah. Well, I think, that's something important when you're trying to do anything that's sustainable, is the partnerships around it, right? The human connections that you create around the project. Yeah. So you've been mentioning a lot the integrated contamination management that you have. So and this is something that, you know, you've mentioned to me is not necessarily used that widely, right? So how do you think that, you know, something like this, how do we get it used more widely?
Yeah.
How do we get it implemented more widely?
I should maybe explain where the name comes from. I think it's important to note that it's logically aligned with the concept of IPM. So an IPM means integrated pest management, which has been around for 3 decades as a term in the sector, specifically in museums. And so both concepts, our ICM and IPM, are kind of sort of complementary siblings with large areas of intersection. Both concepts deal with their own contamination, the one with insects and the other one with the biocides. Okay,
right.
And we feel that one day, and that may not be far away, the two of them can't be mentioned without the other. I mean, one can be mentioned without the other. And so one of the reasons is, of course, the ironic mechanism that ICM now cleans up the mess, excuse the word, which was caused by, as we see them today, by anachronistic methods, which is the use of poison to fight insects, which could have been prevented had we then, in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, known or had the knowledge of the harmful effects of biocides that had been spread widely, and had ICM been around earlier, which was not the case. So how can we spread it more widely? I think the subject is absolutely gaining momentum. However, as many museum collections are struggling at the moment, yeah, it is difficult to really expose the full size and reach of this health issue, because we have to have a workable solution, which we are very close at getting now.
Yeah.
If you ask what museum collections are concerned, it's really very wide. It is textiles, wooden objects, natural history specimens, mixed media. So it's really a lot of museums that are concerned with this.
Sure.
And so, but on the other hand, I mean, so we're very careful, because they're obviously also, I mean, it's our sector, they are close at our heart, they're our clients. So we want to help them and not expose them to a health issue in public at the moment. But on the other hand, safety and well-being is becoming an important issue. I mean, if you look at the United Nations Strategic Development Goal 3, which is well-being and safety at work, and it means that objects with biocide contamination that impact human immunity, we know that, and can cause cancer, that's also known, they should be decontaminated.
Right. Because
already now, and certainly post-COVID, if we ever get there, immunity will be an even more precious asset. So besides the human aspect, of course, there is also the objects themselves, because they can also be harmed by the harmful presence of biocides. It can cause discoloration, corrosion, and the formation of crystals. So we really need to tackle this. It's been around for a long time. I think a lot of people know about this. Some storage areas have been closed off for own staff. And I think we should really work on this together and make sure that this issue is solved, or at least that it's brought back to acceptable levels of biocide presence.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's move on to talking a little bit about the analysis and the research side of IPARC. No contact analysis in the conservation world is really starting to, you know, boom as a methodology. What sorts of tools do you experience with that you think are particularly innovative?
Well, a lot of these, we call them non-invasive analyses, have been coming onto the market the past decade or decades. They may not always have been developed for conservation purposes, but they've been adopted from other application domains, such as the medical imaging. And I'm thinking about X-ray here, infrared reflectography, ultraviolet, so all multispectral imaging techniques that have proven to be very valuable to conservation treatment plans, but also are used in authentication and dating questions. So we are currently working a lot with the latest macro XRF, and that provides a two-dimensional mapping of all the chemical elements in the paint layers of an artwork. And so these imaging techniques, and you don't even have to touch the work, they bring different angles to an object, and they provide really a wealth of data whether we are restoring the work or just researching it, or whether we need a file because it's being sold or because it's been loaned. So there's various purposes. And so the results and references that we collect, I think they can be proven to be more effective, both for our own project as well as for the community, because there is big data. I mean, there is the use of big data, the potential use of big data, and things like Power BI. So this is really part of our vision. I mean, we have set up IPARC 10 years ago to open up our data to a larger community and to make sure specifically that there is a transfer of knowledge in between generations. This will, of course, require a different mindset of a lot of people in the sector to share that kind of information and it is a highly competitive market. So it's not very easy to preach this, but I think it's the only way to go. And so the use of ArtEcheck in this case will help us standardizing data across the board. So it's just the right fit for us.
I'm glad. You know, well, I mean, just, you know, from ArtEcheck's perspective, we're really interested in data in the long term. So, you know, a lot of our like strategic partnerships that we're thinking about for us are about data and about getting, you know, more access to data that not only is just raw data, right? Because raw data is untenable. You can't do much with raw big data, but really good analysis tools that allow you to understand what's going on with your collection in ways that allow you to take actions very easily, right? And ideally allow you to take micro actions rather than, you know, after decades, you have to take enormous actions due to buildup of issues.
Well, I think it also can, I mean, really tap into the whole blockchain application domain. If we move to, for example, online sales, questions of authenticity. So data will help there. And of course, it doesn't breach any discretion that we have with our clients. I mean, of course, we will not disclose anything, but it's different data that we would be able to share. So I see a lot of potential there.
Yeah, definitely. So how do you see these sort of, you know, more innovative art analysis methods and technologies affecting art research in the future?
Yeah, well, I think we'll certainly see less interventions, less on the object treatments, because we already see now a shift to preventive conservation, because it is simply more cost effective to invest, and this is particularly true in reality for the museums. It's more effective to invest in storage and in display management and monitoring to prevent damage rather than to restore. And so insurers as well are also supporting this shift as it minimizes the risks for them.
It's funny you mentioned that, by the way, because we're going to have something on preventative care in a couple weeks.
Interesting.
So, very timely.
I'll log in then. I'll be there.
Yeah. Great.
And so research and analysis will also provide a better understanding of the degradation of the materials used in an artwork. And so which in turn will then lead to less interventions and in treatment and more focus on preventive conservation. So it's really a very strategic building block in how you manage your collection. And so art analysis and research can bring a lot of information that will shift the way objects are treated today. So that's a big evolution. But we see here, and even the past 2 to 3 years, it's been rapidly increasing.
That's interesting. I think what you were saying too about kind of sharing that information in ways that allows for better long-term conservation. So for example, if you're working with a particular media and you discover, you know, it's 200 years old and it has this type of damage or issues with it that you need to fix, and then someone else has the same type of media that's 100 years old, they can sort of see what would happen to them in the future, and they can prevent it with that data.
Yeah, well, today we use aging chambers for that, but that's a complicated approach. So indeed, if you have a days of comparable artworks, and also, I mean, I think it's fair to say that in all master paintings, we kind of know, well, 99.9% of the materials used, how they react, how they, stand through time. But in contemporary projects, I mean, a lot of materials that are being used have not been researched. We don't know how they age. We don't know how they react under light. So, I mean, research can bring you so much information there. So it's definitely a way to go for us.
There's a particular work that our founder, Annika, was the courier for. I think it was for the Serpentine, and one of the materials for the contemporary piece was elephant dung. So, you know, there are definitely materials that you don't know what's going to happen over time.
We've treated artwork, paintings painted in blood, in coffee, yeah, all kinds of cornflakes.
Cornflakes.
So really difficult materials to preserve already, let alone, I mean, to see what they'll be like in 100 years.
Right.
Yeah. But that keeps it interesting, of course.
Oh, definitely. That's, you know, part of the evolving art world, I think.
Absolutely.
And so with these technologies, do you find a non-invasive approach will be more sustainable?
Well, not necessarily so. I mean, there's very valuable invasive techniques like cross-section analysis. I mean, they only remove a very, very, very small micro part of an artwork, and they can bring you different information. And of course, you don't have to do it all the time and not always everywhere. But in some cases, this is a very valuable technique to define or to provide answers to certain questions. So I think non-invasive will stay. Specifically in museum collections, academic research, private collectors may be less inclined to have it done, but even for them, we do it. So it's always going to be a combination of the two. But if you look at imaging techniques and 3D techniques, I mean, there's so much that we can do with non-invasive. I think that will be the bigger chunk in the future, of course.
Yeah, interesting. So what I'd love to talk about right now is a little bit of a departure from what we've been chatting about so far, which is the IPARC organization. So for anyone who's not familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, I'm actually just going to link here. So when we think about sustainability at Artecheck, you know, we're obviously thinking about the environment, but we also like to think about you know, other elements which have been identified by the SDGs. And these include, you know, the right to having a good work environment and, you know, essentially the idea of sustainable human connections and sustainability sort of in all parts of our life, keeping, you know, modern society sustainable as an institution, rather than just thinking about, you know, sustainability in terms of the environment, because it's all connected, right? It's all connected, all these things. So one of the goals, like I mentioned, is decent work. So having, you know, a good work environment, the idea that thriving work environments are more sustainable. So IPARC has a really unique organizational structure. Could you explain how it works, Leen?
Yes. So, I mean, it's fair to say that we live in a market where there's a lot of freelance business or people working on their own or with two people. So very small structures, at least in conservation. So from the very start, when we founded the company, we were 5 founding partners, of which my husband and I were 2. We have adopted the vision that in order to grow sustainably, we had to invest in a team. And in our case, it's only university masters in conservation, but we wanted the team to be on payroll. So as opposed to the sector where freelance basically is the norm. And so we wanted to invest in lots of learning opportunities, and this would be both on the job as well as with third parties, to share research, establish a strong insurance backing, and also, and that's maybe more importantly, to adopt a cooperation model that enables common decision making. So we do it together, and strategy setting. It's fair to say that, I mean, seeing our different backgrounds, I obviously have a more business-oriented background than the others in our board. It's not the easiest way, but it's really the only right one, valuing everyone's value add, networks, client relations. So it's a decision we've taken from the start. and we used to be a cooperative company. We're no longer a cooperative company because by law we can't anymore. But this was basically the idea. Like everyone's contributing to the cooperation, and so it's proven to be very effective. And yeah, the people that have joined us along the way, they're still with us. So we don't have anyone departing, which is always good and a good sign, I think. Yeah. But it's, definitely. I mean, we've really thought hard about what kind of corporation we should set up. And I think the pieces of the puzzle were put rightly.
Yeah, so I just find it really interesting because this idea of sort of having a flat hierarchy is very, very common in sort of innovative spaces like startups. Mm-hmm. So to have this come in and be a conservation, organization that has a flat hierarchy, I just found that to be very different and sort of an innovative approach to.
Yeah. Well, we had three things we wanted to do. One was provide an environment where people that come from the university and basically they're very well trained theoretically, but practical. With the change to university degree, the whole practical hours diminished, so they're not ready to go on an assignment. So they have an environment where they can work and learn and be coached. So that was the first thing. A second one was make sure that there is a transfer of knowledge in between generations, because we were in our 40s, almost 50s. So we wanted to make sure that the good knowledge that we have here in Belgium and abroad, that it's transferred, that it's not somewhere with a freelancer in his small workshop and he's just keeping it to himself because everyone's a competitor. We wanted to break away from that. And then the third thing was to create this multidisciplinary environment where a painting conservator can talk to a wood conservator and they can adopt best practices from each other and also tackle projects together. So it was really that model that really led to the foundation of IPARC, and I still firmly believe that's a really future-proof model.
I love that. So the education and the collaborative elements are really important. Wonderful. So how do you think this innovative structure contributes to sustainability? Like you said, you have low employee turnover and education for future generations. Mm-hmm. What else? Anything else, you think?
Well, I think, in the environment that we have, people are not afraid to make mistakes because, they're not in competition with one another. They can learn from other domains. And also, in terms of specifically in contemporary art, but also in multi-material assignments, because we also have them in old, for example, in the church interior. We can put together the right project team at an ad hoc basis, because the questions are always different and the materials are always different. So they work in teams, but they change every time because it depends on the artwork coming in. And so we also know that people like the fact that even if they're young, they're just coming out of university, they know that they will have the excitement of working on a major piece because they have a senior coach working with them. And so for us, it's really important to maximize high potentials, and because it adds to their empowerment and also to their accountability. So we are really working towards that. And it's a two-way investment. Obviously we have to invest in them, training them, and it takes on average 6 to 7 years to train a conservator. But they also have to commit. It's not a legal commitment, but they kind of commit to this. And well, even if they go after 10 years, we've worked together, we've established relationships, and that's also valuable. So it's really an interesting journey with lots of these people. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point for anyone who's sort of coming into the sector, especially right now. They're probably kind of feeling like things are a little bit rocky, right? With COVID and everything that's happening and so many things being up in the air. But I'm sure that, especially in Belgium, people are glad to have institutions, and in London, to have institutions like yours where they can feel like they can go somewhere and, have this space to safely and successfully grow in their career.
Also, at least in Belgium, I think it's the case in a number of countries as well. We've seen museums over the past decades outsource a lot of their processes like conservation. They've downsized conservation labs. because it is a volatile business. I mean, it's project driven, so it's difficult to have all these people on your payroll, we know. But I think if you look at the specific knowledge that you need to do these assignments, I mean, you have to have structures like ours that are sustainable and are looking at the long term. And that's why we wanted to invest in these people that we have today, because then we know that it's going to be, a long-term story, as opposed to projects and freelancers, which is valuable, of course. And I mean, everyone should do his business like he or she pleases to, but we want to build something bigger, something that people can still look on, well, or still call upon in, even if we're gone. But I realize it's ambitious.
Sustainable.
Yeah, sustainable. That's the word. Yes.
Yeah. So besides completely restructuring, how can other organizations kind of take on some of these principles that you've talked about and innovate their workplaces for sustainability?
Yeah. Well, I can only tell you how we do it, but I'll give maybe 5 takeaways. First is, I mean, we have a plan for sustainability. It's called the IPARC for Climate Plan, which is not very original, I realize that, but it's defined owners for different aspects. For example, for purchase of products, or for waste management, or conservation treatments. And so we defined owners, and we also installed decision-making that is always driven by the most sustainable option. That's something they should always go for. Of course, I mean, budget is always it's also a trade-off, but at least there is a process that defines the answer. And so sustainability is always the bigger argument there. So in terms of choices of products for treatments, for example, we use the non-toxic aqueous cleaning methods. They're widely used in conservation. They've been developed by Paolo Cremonesi. He is an Italian chemist and he's specialized in conservation. And so he really is an environmental freak, so in a good sense, I mean. And he's rethinking cleaning methods to make them less harmful for us and also for the environment. And so this requires, of course, an investment in regular training to stay on top. I mean, you need to invest in the basics of this because they're different methods. You need to learn these cleaning methods. It's a chemical thing. So these are things that you need to integrate them in your daily practice. And there's also evolution. So you have to keep training. And also someone like Chris Staroudis, he's from the Smithsonian, is also doing a great job in finding less harmful solvents to replace the toxic ones with his modular cleaning program. So we kind of follow up on these people, on other researchers, to get all this data in and to slowly but surely progress with this. And then a second takeaway is avoid biocides. We know that by now that they're carcinogenic and poisonous, so don't. The same goes for gases. And so, like I said, in the EU, there is the biocide regulation. So in EU, it is regulated. In other areas of the world, it may be different, but at least that defines what you can and cannot do today. Third, look at the total picture. I mean, obviously, we're also in a building. So we try to have, we bought an energy efficient isolated building for a start. We were first looking at monuments and older buildings because we thought they were very charming, but then we realized we couldn't climatize them. And so we opted for a new building. It's less charming, but it's very efficient. Things like solar panels, basic stuff, but still. Recycling of gloves. I mean, we use a lot of gloves and masks. I mean, always used masks, but even more today with COVID. So recycling those or giving them to a company that cleans them or recycles them and gets new ones to you. We use glass recipients instead of plastic ones. And we demineralize tap water, so we don't have to buy large plastic cans. So these are really basic stuff, but I mean, you have to look at everything and every small thing will count in the end. So we try to do our best. And then number 4 would be that, I mean, if you can have processes certified for CO2 neutrality. So we're going through this at the moment for ICM. Because, I mean, it's a very interesting journey for yourself because you get like an analysis of everything that has to do with doing a treatment. So they kind of map everything that has to do with energy impact, CO2, what have you. So it's interesting for yourself as an organization, but it's also, of course, interesting for your clients to know that you're CO2 certified. So it's definitely something worth looking into. And then number 5, of course, it's ourselves. I mean, it's our staff, it's our management, and we have initiatives such as, I mean, we cycle to work as much as we can. Of course, transporting artworks on the bike is not very easy, so we're not going there, but at least we try to cycle. We do carpooling. We use a search engine like Ecosia. So it's really also a personal journey, and it's a process and an ongoing effort, and you learn and you discover and you develop and innovate as you go. So it's never finished, but yeah, doing your best is the least you can do.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. So you were talking about the CO2 neutrality. Which organization are you doing that through?
CO2 Logic. But there's a few. I mean, in Europe at least there's dozens. So yeah, you can find them in every country basically. And some work internationally, some work really locally.
Interesting. So yeah, I mean, I think that's something that will probably be expanded upon as we go forward, right? More and more certifications like that.
And they also look at your server capacity, how much you consume sending emails. So it's really thorough.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing we were talking about on a sustainability webinar a couple months ago was how much, what carbon footprint your emails have, your email inbox. Mm-hmm. I was pretty surprised.
It is huge, yeah.
Yeah, they live somewhere, right? Not on your computer, but they live somewhere. In a warehouse, in some corner of the world.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and in terms of, some of the education and the collaboration that you were talking about, how do you think organizations can sort of implement those, across the art industry?
Education, you mean?
Yeah, within, do you have like specific mentorship programs within IPARC? Is it just sort of the way that your organization runs naturally?
Well, yeah, it is part of how we run, but we have a few moments every month. Like we have a big information moment every month, first Monday, where a conservator will talk about his project that he's working on, and he will explain what the complexities were, what kind of problems they've tackled, so that everyone knows about the project we're working on, because we're working at about 75 projects at the same time. So not everyone always knows what others are working on. And we also don't do everything here in the building. I mean, sometimes things are done on site as well. So that's important, because it's very informative to have people run you through their way of thinking, how they tackled it. I mean, these are things where you learn from. We also send people to trainings, and then normally, we don't always succeed, they have to brief the rest of the team on what they've learned. So we're happy to let them go to a conference or a training, but the deal is they have to teach the rest. So it's like a trainer. These are basic things. And we always encourage people to go and present at conferences, because conferences are first an excellent way of presenting projects and sharing data and research, but they're also very good for learning purposes and for networking, of course. So they can always go. If they have something to tell, we send them out.
Yeah. Well, I think, when you're talking about having these sort of internal moments where you stop and you allow one member of the team or a couple members of the team to sort of share their experiences and their point of view, that's something that can be very hard, I think, in the modern workplace, because we feel like we're always busy, right? There's no time to stop. But in the end, it ends up helping the organization, right?
Yeah. But it helps if you have like a fixed moment in the schedules. But even then, people try to get away. Like, it's busy. We have something. So, I think it's something they shouldn't miss. It's only one time a month, so it's not the biggest. Yeah, you see that.
We do that too.
I think
we have that as well.
Yeah, it's important, because it also builds company pride. It really tells them, like, wow, are we working on this or that?
Yeah. I might have lost you for a minute, but you're back.
No,
Yeah.
it says my internet connection is unstable, so sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. So I was just going to say that for us, the way that we sort of do it so that everyone is connected and knows what everyone else is working on is every Monday morning to start out the week, we take 20 minutes, 30 minutes on a call with everyone on the team, and they just kind of give a quick update. What did I do last week? What did I do this week? And then that way, it's kind of a way to keep everyone connected, especially as now, you know, a lot of us are working remotely. So
yeah. Well, in our case, we don't really work remotely. It's difficult to restore
that's
it.
true.
So
we do.
But no, of course, we also have these meetings, like stand-up meetings or team meetings per team or per discipline. That's something else, but that's really, they really deal with project issues. But the information sharing and research is really done like in an all company meeting once a month.
I like that. I'll have to think about if we can implement that in some way at ArtEvolve. So a couple questions. Oh, do we receive the link to the webinar afterwards? Yes, you do. So I will answer that as done. And then let's see, Julia. Hello, Julia. We're wondering if you're, I'm going to get to some Q&A questions, but just to preface this, we're wondering if you're working as artwork virtual courier as, let's see. We're wondering if you're working as artwork virtual courier as freelance for art collections and or museums or institutions. This seems one of the best sustainable innovations because of the pandemic situation. So I guess she's asking, are you doing bookend courier work for
yes, courier work, and we're actually, well, very happy with the virtual courier feature. But we do, yeah, of course. I mean, we have art storage clients that we provide these services for. We also have museums that we do courier work for. So, but I mean, we haven't worked on talking to museums on how far they are with accepting virtual courier, because it will also require a change of, working. And it's easy to have the technology, but it's the people who need to go by it or live by it. So surveying the museums at the moment is difficult because they're not really operational, or at least not fully operational. So I'm really curious to find out how they perceive this and how they like it.
Yeah. So I think Julia, just for the audience's edification, Leen is talking about the virtual suite and the virtual courier that our team at ArtEvolve is coming out with later this year. So, and something I'm excited to get you guys on, Leen, is a virtual conservator too. So that's going to be fun.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be that it's going to be flexible in terms of adding documents and all kind of formats to that. It's going to be
multimedia.
Such a good thing to have all in one repository for us, but also for clients. So yeah, that's a big thing.
Great. So Yeonju Kim says, thank you for the webinar. I wonder if there's any concern about packaging artworks, recycling, better materials for the environment.
Yeah, I didn't mention that, but absolutely. The thing is, we've been looking into it because we obviously use a lot of bubble wrap and I mean the typical things. But it's really hard to find good replacements that are fully recyclable. So I think we have to talk to a packaging company, but we didn't have time yet to do that. But we're researching on what we could find, but at the moment we're still with Tyvek and bubble wrap, and both they're not recyclable. So, or only partially recyclable. So yeah, it's a big thing, and it's true that it's a big volume. If you look at it in a total year, what we use and art handlers use and museums use, that's a big yeah. Thank you.
Well, I think for that was a good question. I'm wondering if, obviously bubble wrap and polythene wrap and all those things, those are harder to sort of find a one-on-one replacement with, a direct replacement. But I think crates are probably something that are a little bit easier, right? To find a recyclable replacement for. Because some companies do break down crates after one use.
Well, you could, you could recycle the wood, but you need to make sure it's treated, that it's not infested.
Sure.
That's the trouble with wooden crates. But absolutely, yeah. But there's also something that really bothers me. There's kind of a tradition to throw away things after use. This could be crates, but it also could be showcases in terms of temporary exhibitions. There's so much stuff just being disposed of afterwards. We should really look at this as a sector and find a solution for it, because it's kind of a habit. Like every scenographer wants his own showcases made from scratch, but I don't think that's very sustainable. But maybe there's going to be an evolution anyway towards more sustainability there, because with COVID now, we've seen museums increasingly look at how they can value their permanent collection, because making blockbuster exhibitions all the time and having loans from all over the world, we've seen that in a time like this, it's very difficult. So maybe there's going to be an era where the permanent collection, the own collection in the museum, will gain momentum again, and then sustainability will be, I think more realistic for them.
Yeah. So John Ju just responds and says, if there was a better standardized packaging method, it would be easier to reuse materials. Yeah, that's true. Everyone wants their own material, their own decision, their own choice, right?
Or climate crates, and it needs to be this or that. Yeah, that's yeah.
Steve comments, have you found any way to recycle foam from crates?
Well, we recycle it in the way that we reuse it, but recycling, no, not yet. Foam is also difficult to find. We've tried some other things, but for some artworks, foam is really the material. So, but I'm hoping that other markets like the logistics market, not the art logistics, but the logistics market, which is a far bigger market even than arts, that they will maybe drive innovation there. There's certainly companies working on it, and I mean we need to look at there's European calls for this, but these are very complex big projects, and to get involved in there as a small art company is not always easy. But I'm sure there are people researching this, and that there is data out there, but it's just not available for our sector yet. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that once it's available, you'll be one of the first to know. So. You're pretty on top of things, Leen. Hi. Yeah. So any other questions we have from the audience? Those were some good ones so far. Very. So, okay. Well, I am just very glad that we were able to get you on, Leen, and have you talk about all these things with us, or with me. I'm not a royal we, just me. And we love sustainability here. So this is one of our favorite topics to discuss and try to kind of brainstorm and think about. And I really like the perspective that IPARC has about really making the knowledge sustainable over time, and making the organization sustainable and how it works. So I think that's really fantastic. So thank you so much for sharing everything with us. And anyone who has attended, we will share the recording with you via email tomorrow. And so you can share it around with whoever you'd like to watch the recording. So have a good Thursday evening or afternoon or morning, depending on where you're located. And we'll see you all next week. Thank you, Mackenzie, for having us. It was great. Thank you. Bye. Have a good